Hello friends, welcome. Friend, yesterday the government of India came out with a press note which gave the advance estimate for national income for the current financial year. Now, what does it mean? It basically means this is a projection for the overall national income for the current financial year. The numbers are not yet final, this is just a projection. Now, friends, the projection, as per the current projection, the GDP growth for the current financial year, which is FY 23-24, as per the Government of India's estimate, is going to be 7.3%, which is a significantly good number, right? Very, very good number compared to 7.2%, which was in the earlier financial year. This is for GDP constant, which is at 2011-12 prices. The number is calculated at 2011-12 prices. Whereas for the nominal GDP, the growth is going to be 8.9% versus 16.1% for the previous financial year. Now friends, the reason I am doing this video is to understand whether we have full confidence, right, and conviction on these numbers, and what kind of challenges that we are going to face in order to meet these projections. Now, before I get into the analysis, let's understand what are the line items and how they impact the overall GDP. The line items which constitutes GDP are private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, gross fixed capital formation, changes in stock, valuable, export, import, discrepancies. So all these items constitute GDP. Now friends, except for imports, everything gets added up into the GDP. Imports will get subtracted. Now higher the import, lower will be your GDP, right? Higher the export, higher will be your GDP, right? Now if you look at these numbers, so let's read out these numbers. The private final consumption expenditure number is 97 lakh 74,000 crores. The government final consumption expenditure is 16 lakhs 41,000 crores. The gross fixed capital formation number is 59 lakhs 94,000 crores. These are basically for these are for constant GDP. Then we can ignore the CIS and the valuable numbers because they are very small. Then we have exports at 38 lakhs 6,000 crores, import of 46 lakhs 29,000 crores, discrepancy of 2 lakh 59,000 crores, total adding up to 171 lakhs 78,000 crores, right? So these are the numbers. Now, if you look at the nominal GDP, it adds up to 296 lakhs 57,000 crores, right? Now let's look at the trends, because the trends will tell us the story, and then only looking at the trends and comparing with other parallel data points which the Government of India has released, you will be able to come out with some kind of projection or confidence whether we are going to meet this number for sure or not. So for that, friends, I have created dashboard, as I always do, right? So in this screen you can see there are two different dashboards. One dashboard, which is on your left side of your screen, is giving the trends of various types of GDP types, which is GDP constant, GDP current, GVA constant, and GVA current. And you can look at these numbers from rupees point of view, dollar point of view, growth number in percentage time, both in rupees and both in dollars, in time axis, which is going to be year, quarter, right? And then on the right hand side of your screen is the balance of payment. Why I have bringing balance of payment on the picture is because these are real numbers which have been declared by RBI. Now, GDP numbers we have now captured. Let's try do a quarter basis. If you look at this number, this is also for a quarter basis. The numbers will get added up for the 4 quarters. Quarter number 1, quarter number 2, quarter number 3, quarter number 4 for the financial year FY24. Now, the real numbers of balance of payment which we have is for only the 2 quarters, quarter number 1 and quarter number 2. And this gives us a indication as to what is our current account deficit, which constitute merchandise and services, because these are the two things which make up on the imports and exports, right? Merchandise are going to be goods, and services are going to be real services. So whatever you see here in export and import, these two line items contribute towards export and imports. Now, if you add merchandise and services together, you will see that the trade deficit, the balance of payment trade deficit numbers are shown here in dollar terms. Now, if you look at these numbers on a quarter basis for FY 24-21, so what are these numbers? These numbers are the addition of merchandise and services, means minus 61. So whatever you see, there is a trade deficit of $61 billion and there was a trade surplus of $39 billion, $39.9 billion. So if you look at this number, you will see that there is a trade deficit on account of these two numbers as $21.08 billion. Similarly, for FY 24 Q1, it is $21.5 billion. Now, let's look at the numbers from a dollar point of view. So, if I do GDP nominal, let's say GDP nominal, GDP that is GDP current, and then if I do USD, you will see that these numbers will match because 201.2 is the export number for FY 24 Q4. And sorry, let's not look at this number. Let's look at Q2 because we have numbers till Q2 here. The Q2 number is $189.1 billion export and $210.2 billion export. So if you add these two numbers, because this is negative, this is positive, you will get this number. So I have already done it in this chart. You will see that I am getting this number as 21.03, which is almost matching. Look at these numbers. These are matching. 21.5, 20.17, and there is slight discrepancy. I don't know for why there is a discrepancy, but these numbers are approximately matching, right? 21.03, 21.08, right? So the projection that we are making for FY24 Q3 and FY24 Q4 is lower than these two numbers. Look at this. We are making a projection of 14.87 billion, right? Based on whatever the national income projection came out yesterday, right? But if you look at all the past trends, the numbers have been pretty high. See, except for FY22 Q1, where there was COVID, there must be some kind of discrepancies here. But rest of the numbers, if you see, except for FY23 Q4, the numbers have been quite high. So here, this is a very, very, this is a very liberal projection that we are making, right? Optimistic projection that we are making rather than making a conservative projection, because if we don't meet these numbers, the GDP numbers are going to be pulled down, right? So let's look at this. How much is going to be the impact? So let's assume that if we are going to keep let's say that, for FY24 Q1 and FY24 Q2, if the number is $20 billion negative, and if we assume that we continue to stay $20 billion negative, so these numbers are going to be how much? This is roughly around 5 because this is 14.87. So if you subtract 14.87 for 20, roughly we will get around, let's assume that it is 5, right? $5 billion. So $5 billion plus $5 billion, so $10 billion. So $10 to $11 billion of GDP is going to be pulled down, right, from the nominal GDP. So the nominal GDP numbers, whatever numbers that you have, let's do a yearly GDP. So the yearly GDP number is $3.5 trillion, right? So $3.579 trillion. So if you subtract here, so if I do the calculation on your screen, let's do the calculation. Currently, what is the number? 3579.9 minus 3347, right? And then I'll basically I'll divide by 3347. These 3347. So you see a growth of, in dollar terms, a growth of 6.9%, right? So that is the, right? So 6.9%, that is the growth, right? But let's assume that, if I make it 69 here, because I told you that there will be a difference of $10 billion So if I make it 69, the number is pulled down by how much? The number will get pulled down by, so earlier it was how much? It was 79. So 79 was 6.9. Now if you make it 69, the number will be 6.6%. So there will be a drop of 30 basis point, right? So this is basically on dollar terms, right? And that is why these numbers are coming out to be different. Because why dollar terms the numbers are different from rupee term? Because the conversion rates are different for FY23 and 24. So let's do a rupee comparison. That is going to become much more easy and easy to grasp. Let's do a rupee. Now from a rupee point of view, if I look at these numbers, the GDP numbers, not growth, I will want to see real rupee. So this is 296.6, right, is the total value of GDP. Now if I go and do a quarter level, and that is going to give us a very good picture. So this is what? Assume that these numbers are going to remain at this level. So what is this level? Let's assume because it's 1.66 and 1.7, let's assume 1.7. Okay. So 1.7 minus 1.24, it's 0.46. 0.46, right? So let's assume it is 0.5. So 0.5 means 1. So what is happening is that we are going to get a difference of 1. So 1 means, because this is 0.6, this is also 1.5. So both are going to be 0.5. So because of 2 quarters, you multiply by 2, it becomes 1. So if I look at, if it is 1, it basically means, let's do a yearly calculation and see 296.6 lakh crores, right? So this, what is the growth is? 296.6 minus 272.4, right? And then if I divide by 272.4, it comes out to be 8.9, right? Now if I make it instead of 96, if I make it 95, what is the number now? It's 8.9, it becomes 8.5. See, it becomes 8.5. So the nominal GDP from 8.9 drops down to 8.5. There is a 40% drop of nominal GDP. Now let's do a real GDP calculation and see where it stands. Now if I do a real GDP calculation, again let's go here and see what the difference would be. Let's do a quarter level and see what the numbers are. So it is how much? Assume that it is roughly around 2.75. So 1.4. So this, let's make it 1.4, right? So here we have 2.75 minus 1.4. 1.35, right? 1.35, because if you assume that these numbers are going to remain at this level, because this is quarter 1, quarter 2 number, so 1.35. So 1.35 multiplied by 2, which is 2.7, right? Let's make it 2.5, right? For this, let maybe a little bit optimistic. Now it is 2.5. Now let's go over here and see. This is going to be, let's do a yearly calculation. So yearly 171.8, right? So 171.8 minus 160.1, right? And that divided by 160.1 divided by 160.1 comes out to be 7.3. That's exactly what the number is. Now if I reduce this number by 2.5, so it will, let's make it 72. So 2.5 will be how much? It will become 72. Let's make it so 71. So 71 means 69. Make it 69. Let's make it 2, right? 69. So this number comes out to be 6. See? So earlier what was the number? 71, right? 71.8, 7.3. So if I reduce this by 1, which is make it 70.8, it goes to 6.6. See the impact? Directly from 7.3, if I reduce this number by just 1 lakh crores, then the number goes to 6.6. And what was the number here? See, look at this on a quarter basis. Again, let's look at this number. Because these are the numbers, the trade deficit, export minus import, right? Now, if this number is going to match this number, this comes out to be how much? Same, because 1.4, this is, let's assume this is 2.5, right? So 1.4 minus 2.5, how much it is? It's roughly around 0.9. So I am just taking 1, right? So if it is 0.9 into 1.8, so if I go back here and do the calculation again, so instead of 1.1, it should have been 1.8, right? So you can imagine the impact on GDP, right? Look, if you take 171.8, it comes out with 7.3. If I reduce by 1, make it 170.8, 6.6. If I reduce by 2, right, 69, it goes to 6. See, imagine the impact on GDP if you are not going to meet your export and import numbers properly. So that is what the focus is. Very, very important to understand that our GDP is highly sensitive to our trade deficit. If we are not able to meet our trade deficit numbers as per our projection, we are going to have a huge problem. Now, if you look at the BOP trade deficit numbers, it does not give us a very good confidence because our balance of payment on trade deficit is persistently very, very high in past trends. So it is important to understand this fact that whatever projections that we do, how sensitive these projections are on these parameters. If we are not going to meet these parameters, then we are going to have a problem. Now, let's look at the other aspects of it, right? Let's look at the growth of the key items. So if I do a growth on rupees and see how the private sector, so these are also going to have a huge impact on the GDP if we don't meet the private sector, private final consumption expenditures numbers also. Because these numbers are dropping, right? Look at these numbers. Because the earlier numbers from FY13 to FY18, we were doing a growth of around between 6.4, 8, 6.2, 7.6 before the COVID was hit. Now we are at 4.4%. Now, if we are, so it's basically the private sector, private final consumption expenditure is not up to the mark what we were in before in the beginning of this decade, right? Because if you just ignore the COVID part, because which was an unnatural event, we should actually do what we were being able to do earlier, right? So this is a challenge here. But on a gross fixed capital formation, we are doing quite well because the government has been focusing a lot of its energy on capital expenditure. So this number is 10.3 from a growth. And if you look at the earlier numbers, it was lower. Government final consumption expenditure, the number is low. Now, why I am focusing on this? Because the earlier numbers that you see were on a lower base. Now, if I go and do a value here, you will find that the base was quite low because due to COVID, our base went down. So these numbers are looking very high. The growth numbers that you are seeing here are looking very high. So you have to ignore those growth numbers, growth rupees. Right, the 14.6 yesterday, you just ignore. But you can take this number because by the time we have reached this financial year, the numbers are kind of falling in pace because it's a quarter. This is the yearly numbers, right? So see the numbers are falling. So let's do the quarter numbers. I think quarter numbers are going to give a much better picture because yearly numbers are not. This is a projection numbers, right? So if I do a quarter number, let's see where we stand as far as quarter is concerned. Let's go back in time. It is now 6.1. Let's go back in time by 12. So you'll see 6.1. See, the numbers were very high in the initial stages, right? Now if you look at let's go back again and let's see. Here you see the gross fixed capital formation numbers in this quarter is 1.5, and in the earlier numbers were quite high. The government final consumption expenditure number is in this quarter is low, right? FY24 Q4 the number is low, whereas in the FY24 Q3 the number is high. So anyway, I think you get the picture, what I'm basically talking about. So we have to be mindful about these numbers also, whether we are able to meet this number apart from export and import. But export and import numbers looks to me is very much, optimistic number that we are presenting. If the numbers are not, if you're not going to meet those numbers, our GDP growth is going to be hit. And the sensitivity is pretty high, as I showed you, that the current numbers are. So if I do a yearly number, And if I do not growth, value, as I told you, 171.8. Look at this number. If I do 171, again I repeat this, 171.8 comes out 7.3, right? Just go 1 lakh crore less, number goes to 6.6. Another 1 lakh crore, 69, number goes to 6. See how sensitive the growth numbers would be, depending upon whether we are able to meet our balance of payment and trade deficit numbers are going to be, if it is not held properly as per the projected numbers, right? So friends, I think I'll stop here, and I think I have made the point what I was trying to basically show based on the projections number, and how careful that we have to be, and how much effort that we have to make in order to make these to meet these numbers, because these numbers are extremely important that we meet, because GDP growth of a country creates more opportunity, increases job, and it kind of increases more prosperity, increases our leverage internationally from other economies of the world. And one last point which I like to emphasize here on the point about our GDP in dollars terms, right? So if you look at GDP, you will find that in a dollar term, dollar term, we are at $3.5 trillion end of FY24. So we are still not at $4 trillion. So we still have to work significantly more in order to get to $4 trillion. So maybe it will take another 1.5 years more in order to reach 4 trillion, because in the beginning of this financial year we were at $3.3 trillion, which is FY23. Now end of this financial year, as per the Government of India's projection, we will be at 3.5. So we have just grown how much? Around $200 billion. So how much we are going to grow? So if you assume 8% growth, because the current growth in dollar terms, if I see the dollar terms growth, it is 7%. See? So even if you assume an 8% growth of GDP in dollar terms, right? So if you do an 8% growth, so multiply this by 3579 into 1.08, we are still at $3.8 trillion by the end of next financial year, right? So we'll still have to go another maybe around 1.5 years more before we hit $4 trillion, right? So friends, I think I'll stop here. I will not take much of your time. And I hope that you have understood what are the sensitivities which we have to look into, and we have to be very careful, and we have to work very hard in order to meet these numbers before we become very comfortable and complacent. And I am hoping that we will be able to do it, because the Government of India is very focused. We are all focused in order to grow our country and make our country much more prosperous and an important partner in the world economy, and so that lives of people can be improved. Thank you very much for your patient listening. I'll come back next time with a new topic of a new subject to talk about. Thank you very much.